And Father, please be the words that I say, they be an accurate reflection of what you would have everyone hear. Amen. All right, so we are starting this new sermon series called Rise, looking at the different resurrection narratives and the stories and seeing what we can get out of them. Basically, how we can see how a new life has come, how we have hope in the resurrection of Jesus, how we have hope in what he is doing there, hope in what he has given us, and how we can then take and give that hope to the people around us. So to start off this, we need to look at something kind of interesting here. So we have this picture. Has anyone seen this picture before? You have. So you know what it is, right? Don't ruin it. No, so anyone else? Anyone else? So that's interesting. Brooklyn, you've seen it before. All right, cool. So we have two in this one person in the other one. So we'll get back to this. But what is that? Before we explain what it is, how do you feel about this painting or picture? Like, you feel okay about it? It's like, it's kind of got like a kind of a surprised face, I think, a little like, type of thing. Like over there, but there's really no strong feelings towards it, right? Like, that's just kind of like, okay, whatever. So, then let's look at this other one. What do you think of this one? Have you ever seen this one before? Oh, yeah, right? There is not a church that I have been a part of that doesn't have this painting lurking around somewhere inside of it, right? Like, that's over there. Does anyone have this in their house? I'm not going to ruin it tonight. Yeah, I'm not going to ruin it. Don't worry about that. So this painting is incredibly popular. In fact, it is the best-selling painting of Jesus that there has ever been. Now, let me ask you a question about it. How old is this painting? Ooh, old. Yeah, old. It's at least 40 years old, right? That's... How old? Who thinks it's over 50? Over 50. Yeah. How about over 100? Do you think it's over 100? Yeah. You think it's over 100? How about over 500? He looks like he's 26. Yeah. That's. I don't know. That's yeah. Like, he's handsome Jesus there, right? Like, handsome Jesus. Like that. That's so. Do you kind of think Middle Ages, something like that? Yeah. Like something like that. 1941. Is when this was painted. So Cassie, you're right, it's really old. Cassie loves those jokes when I do that. That's yeah. So like that. I mean, but it's not as old as you'd think it would be. 1941. It's not even 100 years old yet. That's wild. It's got a good amount of time before it hits that. Yet it's one of the best-selling things. And what I think's funny about this picture is in its comparison to this picture. So what this other one, was some forensic anthropologists went in and studied the bones and the facial features and all that of people that existed around the region of Judea, around Jerusalem, in the time of Jesus. And they kind of took all that information and tried to make a composite of what something Jesus would actually probably look like. That probably isn't what he looked like, but something like that, right? And he would also be about 5'5". All right? So when we think in our minds of like Jesus standing tall, all that stuff, sorry. That's, he would have been over there. He'd barely been able to get on roller coasters, right? All that stuff. That's what he is. And what I think is funny is that all of these, we have good old white Jesus, with good old white guy, long hair over there. It's almost like you get on the surfboard right after that, right? We get on there, and I think it's funny is that that's kind of our mental image of who Jesus is, and it's almost like Mary at Christmas time birthed the only white kid in all of Judea, right there, right? That's it. And I think we kind of expect, and that's the thing is that sometimes our presuppositions and what our understanding of what Jesus is can actually kind of get in the way. Is there anything wrong with that painting? No. There's nothing wrong with that painting. But can our image of our mind of that's what Jesus is like? Because what's that saying? Like, that's Jesus is very stoic and like, I got this and all that stuff. I kind of think Jesus was probably a little sarcastic at times. Little things. We'll talk about that and all that. But that presupposition can get in the way, and we can actually miss what Jesus is doing right now, right around us. That's what this sermon is about today. It's about the road to Emmaus. I love this story, and I love this story so much that the middle school youth gathering, let's see, that was like 3 years ago now. It had a theme called "What's Next," and I based it on this. On the road to Emmaus. I based it on this story. So let's break it down. Let's kind of go through the road to Emmaus story so you kind of understand what's going on. So you have two people. We call them disciples. They're not like of the 12, but they are disciples of Jesus. We know one of them's gender. We don't know the other one. It could have been a guy and a girl, two guys. Like, I don't know. But they're walking down. It's just after, it's like the third day. It's the day that Jesus rose from the dead. And they're walking, and they're kind of dejected. They're walking back to Emmaus, and they're kind of kicking stones and all that stuff. And then something happens. Jesus appears behind them as they're walking along. And I love how that, like, you have to picture this in your mind. You can check out the story in the bulletin if you want. But Jesus appears, and it's almost like he has to run to catch up with them. You know, it's kind of like, hey, what are you guys talking about? You know, like that kind of sense. Like he kind of catches up with them, and they start talking about what's going on, and they're like, what do you mean? What are we talking about? Like. And he's like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what's going on. They're like, are you the only one? Are you the only one in all of Jerusalem who doesn't know what happened the last year? In the last few days? And they talking about how Jesus had done all these amazing things, as he was mighty in deed and word, and they thought he was going to redeem Israel, but then he was crucified by his own people and by Rome itself, that's dirty, nasty Romans. Like, they can't believe it. But here's what's interesting. They're talking about Jesus, and Jesus is right there by them. Like, Jesus is right next to them. Their expectations, their vision, their eyes, they're blinded to Jesus because there's no way he could be next to them, right? There's no way you see that. It's very kind of funny. So they say that Jesus was this amazing guy, that he was mighty in word and deed, and our chief priests crucified him. And then they say this, and this I think is the most important verse pretty much in this section. He said, but we had hoped that he, Jesus, was going to be the one to redeem Israel. Okay, all right, great. What does redeem mean? Let's break this down. What does redeem mean? Save, like that's yeah, bring back. What does it mean if you redeem a coupon? Like you collect it back, right? Like all that stuff. These are all, we have different definitions for these things. I love the word redeem. I love the word redemption. I use it all the time because it means salvation and bringing everyone back and kind of creating a new world. I mean, the second part of the Apostles' Creed we view as Jesus. We call it Jesus the Redeemer. Right? He's the one that brings us back, that buys back. But, how are they using it? How are they using it? So they're using it for saved, but I think they're defining saved in a little bit different way than we do. So let's look and think about how they would save it, how they would talk about it. When you look at the scriptures, when you look through there, the first place that redemption is mentioned, being redeemed is mentioned, is in Exodus chapter 6. What's going on in Exodus? That's when God is ripping out his people out of the clutches of slavery, out of the clutches of Pharaoh. He's ripping them out of those things to save them, to redeem them, right? Like he's ripping them out of all of that. So that would be loaded into their minds of how God has ripped them, taken them from the clutches of Pharaoh. Okay, that means redemption. And then why were they in Jerusalem? They're going back to their hometown of Emmaus. Why are they in Jerusalem? Passover. What's Passover about? Redemption, God ripping God's people, saving them from the dirty, nasty Pharaoh of their life, right? All right, you guys are smart. Who's Pharaoh to these guys now? Rome. Rome, right? Rome. That's who's Pharaoh now. And they look at Rome as the oppressors, and they look at Caesar, who is Pharaoh, and his little overlord minion is Pilate, and all these chief priests and all that stuff, they're all part of it, and they all hate them all and all that stuff, and they can't stand any of it, right? And they look at Jesus, and they see Jesus being like this mighty guy. I mean, he's doing all these miracles, and they're like, oh my goodness, this guy is it, right? So they saw Jesus as the one who could redeem, much like it was redeemed. Save us from Rome, okay? And I know some of you are like, that's interesting for a sermon, Pastor, but you're probably being a little extreme on this. Let's get to what I learned this week. I didn't know this until 5 days ago, all right? Emmaus, they're going to Emmaus. They probably grew up in Emmaus. They live in Emmaus. When I say Emmaus, what do you think of? Small town? Yeah? Like nothing? Like Yeehaw Junction, my favorite. Like that's Yeehaw Junction. I love making fun of Yeehaw Junction. It's my favorite thing. They have a pretty sweet truck stop up there now. We'll say that new pilot. But it's, yeah, Yeehaw Junction. Like we think of like nothing there, but like what would they have thought then? So Emmaus is a loaded term to them. We have loaded terms for us even to this day. We have these with this loaded language and all that stuff. And I can prove it to you. I'm going to say one phrase, and you tell me what you think. Pearl Harbor. Yeah. What do you think of? World War II, the bombing, all that stuff. You don't think of like, oh, they have the best beaches, and there's a little small cabana that serves the best pina coladas ever, right? No, you think of like the war and what got us into World War II and all that stuff. If I say Gettysburg, what do you think of? You don't think of like a suburb of D.C. or something like that, right? Like that's not what you think of. You don't think of anything like that. You think of the Civil War. In the town, its entire existence is about the Civil War, right? They got a little cottage industry to make sure you remember the Civil War. Like that's what's doing. Like these words, that's what Emmaus was. Emmaus, because there was a huge battle of Emmaus that happened about 100 to 150 years before Jesus' time. Because see, at that time, there was this guy who was known as the Hammer. We've talked about him before. His name is Judas Maccabeus. Does that sound familiar? It should from 2 Sundays ago, because on Palm Sunday, when Jesus rides in on a donkey, he's emulating Judas Maccabeus riding in on a big white war horse, who he's just defeated the Greek occupation of Jerusalem, and he's riding in on a big white war horse, and Jesus is kind of saying that. That's the beginning of Hanukkah, by the way, when Judas Maccabeus does that. But before that, Judas Maccabeus is freeing from captivity all these little outlying cities and towns. You can read about this in the Apocrypha, 1 Maccabees chapter 4. Okay? If you have a Catholic Bible, the Apocrypha is in that. In our Protestant Bibles, it's not in there. You got to buy it separately. Sorry, profiting. And what happened is the Persians, Assyria, modern day Iran, had occupied Emmaus there, and there was this big battle that was forming. There's no way that Judas Maccabeus and his Hebrew warriors would be able to win the battle, but against all odds and really good battle planning, Judas Maccabeus, the Hammer is what his name was, is what he was called, goes in and kicks Assyria out, kicks the Persians out, and he wins this great battle. And do you know the word that they use in 1 Maccabees chapter 4 to describe it? Redeem. Ooh, right? So, if you were lived 2,000 years ago and you're reading this and you see Emmaus, immediately you would be thinking about the redemption of God's people from their overlords of Assyria, the Persians, right? You would immediately go there and be thinking of that and redeem. So when you look at these guys and what they're saying, we had hoped that he was the one that was going to redeem Israel. He's not talking about white Jesus in the painting. Oh, he's going to save us, right? He's talking about big, powerful Jesus who's going to kick Pilate off his throne, kick Caesar out of thing, and rule from on high with lightning bolts coming out of his eyeballs like Superman and stuff like that, right? Like this big, powerful. And they're like, we had hoped that he was going to do that, but he died. See that? And now Jesus is right next to them, and they don't see him. Because why not see them? Because he looks nothing like they think he should look. He looks nothing like they think he should be. Like he's completely different than everything that they are expecting. They expect a redemption. And this is what I think is interesting about redemption. Like that they thought when the Messiah would come, that he's going to come with all this power and huge muscles and lightning out of fingertips, much like Zeus, and like all these things coming out of him. But how does he come? He comes as a servant. He comes as one who's washing feet. He comes as that, and then he dies, taking all of that. That doesn't make any sense. And what I think is funny, and you can tell that we do this because we still worship strength and might and all of that stuff, that when you quiz people about how is Jesus going to come in a second, when Jesus comes in the second time, goes right back to that original playbook. He's going to shoot fireworks out of his fingertips. He's going to do all these things, right? He's big, powerful mind, come back on a mighty steed. Why in the world would Jesus come in a different way than he did the first time? Why? May we not miss him because he's not doing what we want him to do. May we not miss him because he doesn't look the way that we want him to look. See that? May we not be like those on the road to Emmaus. They completely get this wrong because we worship at the altar of power. We really do. And I think that's just the nature of who we are. You know, we live in one of the big superpowers and we're obsessed with it. Like, give me power, right? Give me power, give me power, give me power. Like Jesus is going to come in that same power of dropping bombs and all that stuff. We have no... Like, even though we have the story of how God actually redeems Israel, how he actually redeems us, and he does it by taking all of our wantings and evils of destruction, taking it onto himself, right? And rises again. And rises again. Like that's, like we do all that. So these guys, or this guy and girl, whatever they are walking, and they walk to their house. And Jesus is explaining all this stuff. And you know they can talk. They're like, wow, this is a really good Bible study, but like, you know a lot here, man, but I don't know. And so they get to their house. And they're like, come on in. And Jesus is like, no, I can't possibly. And they're like, come on in and eat. And he's like, oh, all right. And he comes in and eats. And I love this. This, like, one of the things I war against constantly is people that think like the Bible is just like an encyclopedia, like a Wikipedia entry. It's just like, and then Jesus did this on Thursday at 3:00 in the afternoon, and then he ate a fig Newton, and then he ate this, and then he drank some wine. Like, I think that all of that stuff, that's not how any of the Bible was written. If it was written like that, we wouldn't be Christians today. Because that's boring. Stop making the Bible boring. All right? Stop making the Bible. Look at how this dinner goes. Right? Stop making it boring. So when they were at the table with him, he took bread and blessed it and broke it and gave it to them. What does that sound like? Sounds like communion, right? All of a sudden, so something that just had happened a little bit before. Remember Passover? Not but like 4 nights before this? All of a sudden, he takes bread, blesses it, and you know when things sound familiar, like, what? And you can tell what goes on because it says, and then their eyes were open and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight like Batman, right? Like so he took the bread, and you can just imagine what they're doing in here. They're like, and he blessed it, broke it, and they're like, oh, it's Jesus! Where'd he go? You know, like that whole thing. Like he was gone. Like suddenly, they see him near them, and he's gone. And he's gone. He's gone. And they see that he is the risen Lord. They see that he is there. That all of their hopes and dreams for Jesus, of him coming in power and glory and might and destruction and lobbing bombs and kicking all the baddies that they wanted to kick out, right? They realized all that stuff was small. And that Jesus was actually redeeming them from that sinful way that they were thinking. That he was redeeming them from that. And he vanishes from their sight. So why is this even in here? Why is this story here? I think, let's see. I just realized that I completely skipped a part of my sermon. That's all right. The reason why this is in here is that I got to get to it now. I got to scroll. These two saw that Jesus was alive and their eyes were opened, and Jesus invited them to the table. And just like the Apostle Paul, the scales fell from their eyes. So when we come to the table, when we see Jesus, like it's important, I think, for us to be humble, to humble ourselves, to humble and admit that sometimes our presuppositions are actually rooted in the sense where we want sinful power and gain for ourselves. And we may miss who Jesus is. But the beautiful part of the story is that Jesus goes in and eats with them, and he shows them who he is. He redeems them, and he redeems each and every one of us from all those feelings and all those misguided thoughts, of all those things of power and destruction, of all those times we want power. He redeems it all, saves us from ourselves, and brings us to life. And I think the reason why he does that is because then that brings a new hope for us all. And when we have that hope in the resurrection, that he has redeemed us from our own sinful natures, then we can share hope with those around us. Not to be like, do you know where you'll go when you die? There's no hope in that. But there is hope in helping someone that's hungry. There's hope in showing someone love that isn't any lovable. There's hope in standing up for things of justice. There's hope in doing all that because we know that Jesus has saved us and that he has said that we are good. So my prayer for you as you come to the table, that Jesus would open your eyes and that you would see what he has done for you. So Christ is risen.
He is risen indeed. Hallelujah.
Excellent. Jesus, we thank you that you have gathered us all here together. Continue to open your scriptures to us, that we may, your screens to us, right? That you would continue to open your scriptures to us, that we may see you working all around us. And Lord, humble us that we would not miss where you are working right around us. Thank you, Jesus. Amen. So thank you so much for all your support over the last year. And we've got to